Is that a Ruby's mask or is that one of those nicer masks?
All right, I clicked a button.
I got it from somebody else, and I repainted it.
It looks pretty good. Not a huge fan of that movie, but it says we're live.
Yeah, I was pointing at you.
I'm too busy looking at Nate's mask.
I was born alive.
Hello, everyone who is watching us. Talk about. Okay, whoa.
Mute your
I
audio.
just wanted to share this. So right now we're going to talk some horror. Welcome. We've got Seth with us.
Hello.
He looks safe and kind of ominous today.
Yep.
We've got Jared with his mask. Keith.
Welcome for joining.
I thought you were going to wear your Jason or Michael Myers mask.
It's in the case.
It's in the case. And then, of course, we have Nate with us as Bane.
Oh.
After this episode is over, you have our permission to die, right?
Are you actually doing a voice, or is it literally just muffling you?
You decide.
Nobody cared about him until he put on that mask.
No one.
So we're going to talk about decade-defining horror today. We're back by popular demand. Usually we're doing our shows on Mondays, but we're going to do an extra show this week just because, there's a weird situation going on, and we love talking horror. Like, hopefully you do too. So, welcome everyone to Real Talk with the Horror Syndicate. Anyway, so how do you want to start this out? You want to start off in the 20s, or you just want to kind of roll?
Yeah, start in the 20s.
I would start in the 20s just because there's going to be less to talk about in the 20s.
It's the easiest decade to decide. I mean, we had some comments on Facebook, and most of them are Nosferatu. I mean, I think we can all agree that's probably the defining horror movie of the 1920s. I mean,
I don't agree with that.
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Nosferatu is my favorite, but when I thought about it, I thought it came down to three, and that's one of them: Caligari, Nosferatu, and Phantom of the Opera.
Phantom
and the reason I think Phantom of the Opera wins is because Lon Chaney was such a defining figure in the genre, and that was his decade, that you got to pick a Lon Chaney movie.
It was also the highest grossing horror movie in the 20s. That I found. The 20s and the 40s, 20s, 30s, and 40s were hard to find, like, what was the highest grossing crap of.
Yeah. I just think because Lon Chaney, it would be weird not to have a Lon Chaney movie define the decade. Although, again, Nosferatu is my favorite of the 20s.
Yeah. I think that's the most well-known out of all of them, of course, because there's been multiple Phantom of the Operas, and, I've tried sitting through the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's a hard movie to watch now. Probably back then it was fine, but I don't know. It feels undisputed to me, but I see where you're coming from. Anybody else want to comment on the matter?
Caligari had such an influence on filmmaking in the 30s, really. So many people followed that German expressionist style. So those three are definitely the important ones.
Yeah, probably. There's a couple of them that
you could throw Hunchback in there. So.
Yeah. There's a couple I have never seen that I've wanted to see, but I don't know if it's worth watching, like Faust and is it Haxan?
Haxan and Faust.
Yeah.
Haxan, yeah.
Haxan's just like, I never even heard of it until maybe 5-10 years ago. Like everybody always talking about it now.
Really?
Yeah, I don't remember I knew about Faust. Faust is a big one, but I never actually being in conversation.
Well, for me, when I think of the 1920s, I think of Nosferatu and turning my fan on. Sorry.
I think if you look at what's the most iconic thing from that decade, it's when she pulls that mask off of him when he's playing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that's true. That's you see that in a lot
face.
of horror montages too.
Mhm.
Is that scene?
Montage.
But there's also the scenes where like I put in our little trailer of him seeing the sunlight and I don't know, or creep it. There's you could go with either one. I think I don't think there's a wrong answer here at all. Honestly,
No.
they're both pretty great.
The way Max Shrek to me and Nosferatu, the way he looked, like kind of trumps. I know Lon Chaney, it's a great movie too, but just the way he looks like in that entire movie,
Very subhuman.
Very. And he's got those. I don't know if they put prosthetics on his fingers, but he must truly have really long fingers.
Yeah. Another thing, and for the 20s, the makeup effects are really good in both movies.
For sure.
And I don't. That's another thing I was thinking about is like which one looks. I mean, the reveal for the Phantom. Nate's right on that. That reveal is a very iconic. I thought I turned my volume down. Sorry. Very iconic horror moment. And
maybe 10.
It's on silent now. Very iconic horror moment for sure. And yeah, maybe you think of the 20s, you think of that. My problem is there are other Phantom movies that kind of it may have gotten forgotten also because there's other movies. And one that hasn't been seen that that kind of is revered for me is London After Midnight. Is that the 20s? Yeah, that's one that nobody gets to see because the print is lost. But that's one that always comes to mind for me. For some reason, I thought it was the 20s, but I wasn't 100% sure. So, but I've got 2 of the 3 movies we've mentioned. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I actually have that on DVD. And Nosferatu. Of course, I have the later Universal release of the Phantom of the Opera. So do we go ahead and move into the 30s? Anything on Facebook yet? Is anybody watching?
We have 12.
Okay, so if you're watching us on Facebook, please chime in with what you think are iconic movies or defining movies of the decade we're talking about. So right now we're talking about the 1930s. And this one is obviously it's got to be Universal movies for sure because Universal in the 1930s, I mean, that was horror. And so many icons came from that. Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman came 2 years after the 40s were over, but all Universal. And for me, when I was thinking about it, I don't know about you guys, but I was going back and forth between Frankenstein and Dracula.
Same here.
But at the same time, I think The Bride of Frankenstein is a better film than the actual Frankenstein.
That's the best film, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think a sequel should define the decade. I think Frankenstein takes it.
You think? I
the James Whale movie.
It was the highest grossing in the 30s.
I feel like Bride of Frankenstein just feels more of a complete movie though. Whereas the first Frankenstein, it's I don't know, 40 minutes in until he escapes.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of quickly over after that. Whereas Bride, I mean, they're both, it's basically just one big story.
Yeah. It's the same. Yeah. I think my thing is Bride is the sequel. It's hard to give a sequel or a remake the defining trophy to me. That's why I picked. For me, it's Frankenstein because it's the first. It invented that whole James Whale, Boris Karloff look, the Colin Clive, it's alive, he's alive, it's alive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Bride is totally better film. The best film of that decade, as far as horror, in my opinion.
I got another suggestion for the 30s as well.
What do you got?
It's not Universal. It's I don't think it's done by Universal, but The Freaks by Todd Browning.
Oh yeah.
1932, I think.
That's not a Universal film, I believe.
I had one other suggestion for the 30s.
Ooble gobble, one.
It came down to, for me, it was Dracula, Frankenstein, or King Kong.
Yep.
Okay, I could see that, and everybody knows King Kong. That's one of the things I was thinking about. Everybody knows Dracula. Everybody knows Frankenstein. Everybody knows King Kong. One that I really like that's from the 30s is the old Dark House. But
That's
I don't
my
think
favorite.
yeah, I don't think that even is going to compete with the likes of the Dracula or Frankenstein. Dracula's mine. Jared, what about you?
Dracula's mine for sure. Just Bela Lugosi's piercing eyes and like, yeah, he wasn't the greatest actor, but just like the way he would look at somebody or like his physical movements made that movie more than
that and Dwight Fry. I mean, Dwight Fry was amazing in that role as Renfield.
Yeah,
I love. So there's a lot of things about Frankenstein I do love, but if I'm going straight to, if I'm going to watch a Universal horror, I'm starting with Dracula every time because of the performances from not only Bela Lugosi or Dwight Fry. Was it Edward Van Sloan who plays
Van Helsing?
Van Helsing, thank you. Had a little brain fart going on. But yeah, I mean that's my first choice. I've always been a big Dracula vampire fan though. Like when I started buying VHSs, I was obsessed with buying vampire movies because of my love for, honestly, Christopher Lee as Dracula in the 50s and 60s. And I just became obsessed with him because that was the first Dracula movie I had ever seen, was the horror of Dracula. So I don't know. I think again, when it comes to the 30s,
well, Dracula started it, really. I mean,
yeah. And I think even though the music is shared in The Mummy, the soundtrack now is very iconic. Even though, honestly, if you've watched the Spanish version of Dracula, it's a little bit better.
Yeah, better made.
Huh? Yeah, exactly. Using the same sets and the same script and everything. I don't know. I think it's Dracula. I don't think it's a wrong answer. What's that?
I don't think it's a wrong answer either. I think you can go with any of those. I mean, my argument with Frankenstein is that it was Karloff's decade. It was James Whale was the best director of that period.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's yeah. Again, there's no wrong answer. You got about 4 movies in there that are really good contenders, and Invisible Man's a great fucking movie. So
no, Seth will definitely talk about that. His first article with the Horror Syndicate was ranking the Invisible Man movies. The one I just want to throw in there just for fun, even though it's not decade defining, is my favorite of the decade. Honestly, I do love Dracula, but The Son of Frankenstein with Basil Rathbone.
Yeah,
it's such a damn good movie. It's got just a little bit of everything in it.
That was the 40s.
No, it came out in 39.
Dun dun dun.
Double head nod.
we simultaneously head nod. Let's look it up. Let me look it up.
Son of.
Oh, you look it up, Stat Boy.
Frankenstein, 1939.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because in the 40s you start getting the shift into, you know, the Wolfman and all the mashup movies, and I think that was the last standalone sequel.
I was thinking of Son of Dracula, maybe.
Yeah, Son of Dracula with
that was 43, right?
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
I think you're right on that.
1943.
Yes, 1943.
That's one thing about horror fans that's really cool is we tend to remember years things come out. I don't see that in many other fandoms. You know, so yeah. So Dracula and Frankenstein seem to be the clear-cut winners. Anything from Facebook, Stat Boy? That's your new name.
What is it?
Stat Boy.
Stat Boy.
Because you're coming up. You're doing the years. You're doing the top grossing.
No, we don't have any comments.
King Kong's got to be one of those. It's okay. Frankenstein, Dracula, and King Kong, because everybody knows King Kong worldwide.
Yeah.
I mean, how iconic is it when he's up at the very top of the Empire State Building? You know?
I mean, you get it's 3 huge icons from that decade. It's just hard to count.
King Kong literally is huge.
And he's literally huge, but like there's so much about King Kong that's like iconic as Bela, as Dracula, and Karloff's monster.
The Mummy was there too. I mean, you forget Boris Karloff as the Mummy.
But I don't think that's the best of the Mummy series.
I was not actually impressed the first time I saw the Mummy.
I had a hard time watching that one.
Yeah, I think
the Mummy's hand is better.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, let's head nod again. Or head to Mummy's hand. Oh yeah, I agree with that.
Fantastic.
You know, I felt the same way about The Invisible Man the first time I saw it, but that was years ago. Watching it later on and understanding it a little bit more, and then especially how they were able to do the effects.
The effects they were able to do in that movie. Yes.
That's when I became more impressed with that movie. When I was much more mature. But yeah, I think The Mummy, that's the weakest of its own series, which is like Friday the 13th is the weakest of its series. No, not the weakest, but it's not the strongest for sure. So I
fair.
say the top 3 defining movies of the 1930s that everyone should watch. And I think that everybody should see these movies that's a horror fan at some point in time. So we got Dracula, Frankenstein, in no order, and then King Kong. Absolutely.
Horror homework.
So Keith, have you seen any of these?
I have seen Frankenstein once. That was it.
All right, get on it. Load that cart.
So I think this is the one.
There's a really cool VHS edition that Universal released, I think in the 80s or early 90s. It was all the movies with matching covers. Are so cool looking. I can't explain.
Yeah, you're talking about the Universal collection. It's got like the
Yeah.
silver brand logo.
I think so.
Yeah, in my VHS group, there's people who are like still trying to complete that set.
Anybody seen The Werewolf of London?
Haven't.
Werewolf of London? No. It's the first werewolf movie, and it's in the 30s. I think it's 33, maybe 32. So it's
35, I think.
35. Okay, it predates the Wolfman, and there's a great scene, not a really great transformation scene, but he's in his house and he transforms into the werewolf, and he's going out to the streets, and he gets to the front door and stops, puts a scarf and his hat on before he goes out the door. Best scene in horror history. He's an angry monster beast, a werewolf, and he stops to put his scarf and his hat on. It's such a good scene. Check it out. Werewolf of London. My brother-in-law actually pointed that out to me, and I ended up buying him the VHS just because of that moment. So, moving on to the 40s. Is there any question on the 40s? What do you guys got? Let's start with Seth on this one because I know what he's going to say.
Wolfman.
Yeah, without a doubt, the Wolfman. Anybody else got anything other than the Wolfman? I mean,
well, the only
Nate-
contenders I would say would
Nate
be
brought it up off air the other day. That's the one I would go with.
Val Lewton and the Cat People, and his films were big. But also, you talk about those mashup movies that really defined that decade too.
Oh,
You
yeah.
get like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, or
Frankenstein meets a werewolf man.
House of Dracula,
vice
House
versa.
of Frankenstein, all that.
Those are really good too. Those are, I think, a little bit underrated movies.
But I think you got to go with the Wolfman.
Yeah.
The biggest icon of that decade.
I wonder how much money that made. Give him
Hang on.
something to do.
Hang
I agree.
on.
It had a wonderful. I mean, I think this was the first time we had seen a full transformation of a werewolf on screen. Because that was the She-Wolf of London before that or after that.
I thought it was before.
Let's
I
see.
can't remember. It's not good. Let's just. And I don't think she transforms. But I
Yeah,
don't think she's ever an actual wolf.
IMDb doesn't have any what it made. It just has its budget, which was $180,000.
Sometimes
Jeez.
Wikipedia, that's Star Wars.
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia. Yeah. Wikipedia has the gross number.
Yeah.
I know the highest grossing in the 40s was a horror comedy called The Ghost Breakers, which I'm pretty sure
Oh.
is where Ghostbusters got their idea for Ghostbusters.
Bryn Peterson says The Body Snatchers and Phantom of the Opera from the 40s.
Oh,
And
really?
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
I don't think the Body Snatchers came out till the 50s.
Yeah, that was 55 or 56.
Good movie though.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Well, there is
The
a
Body
movie in
Snatchers,
45 called The Body
1945.
Snatcher. Yeah, with Karloff. There's so many.
Yeah, I don't think they mean Invasion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the Karloff movie, The Body Snatcher.
Okay. See, the viewers are learning me.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
Karloff and Bela Lugosi.
So we do have some comments on Facebook. Sean Stiff says, no, The Mummy and Dracula are too much the same film. However, they were breaking new ground. The Island of the Lost Souls is the best of the 30s. Werewolf of London was meh. It is, but that scene's magical.
Yeah, I don't know why I have to update my crap to get comments.
And then Bryn Peterson says also Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde after he says Karloff and Body Snatcher and Phantom of the Opera from the 40s. That's the one I've seen more of, was that one. But I know about, the one from the 20s as well. Was it 22 maybe?
Hey, Phil. Said, hey there, dudes.
Hey there. I know Phil. He's a colorist for comics. So anyway, moving on. We just... Is there anything? I think Cat People is a cool movie. I don't know if it defines the whole, because there's a good remake of that, and I think it's good. You don't like it?
I wasn't a fan of it. I love the original though. It's just hauntingly beautiful.
Friendship over. Friendship over.
I mean, the chick is hot. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, remake. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I have no argument with it. You saying a chick is hot.
How many colors are on here? Wow, I've colored comics.
I tried once and it turned out very, very miserable. It led me to drink.
So we're moving on to the atomic age.
Yeah, let's just say the 1940s is without a doubt the Wolfman, right? So write that down. Keith, have you seen that one?
Nope.
Okay.
I haven't seen any of these classic Universals.
That's too
Go to
bad.
Amazon, add to cart.
Stop!
There's a box set that has every Universal.
I know. That's in my cart. I've been waiting for it to drop.
I got the DVD set for like
you buy
47,000
T-shirts, but you can't buy some Blu-rays or some DVDs.
I do buy Blu-rays.
Come on now.
It wasn't the Blu-ray set, but I found the Universal box set for like $25 on DVD. Like everything.
When it comes to something like that, I don't think you need a Blu-ray.
I don't think that Blu-ray matters.
No, the DVDs look fine because I've got both, and I can barely tell.
Wolfman.
Yeah.
I was really tempted to get all those Alex Ross painting releases, though, man.
Those are awesome.
Were those the green ones?
I think like Best Buy put them out or something. They were like a limited edition.
I know which ones you're talking about.
I know which one you're talking about. There was like green ones and red ones and blue
I
ones.
have these.
No, they were when Alex Ross painted the cover.
They have they're almost like splash paint or like ooze or something. They have like weird neon color.
I have these. They glow in the dark.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of.
But they got.
I'm talking about the comic artist.
Okay.
I have to look for those. That sounds something right up my alley.
They're beautiful paintings, man.
I mean, it's Alex Ross. He's one.
Yeah.
He's not one of the best. He probably is.
Wouldn't be beautiful. Alex Ross is doing that. We on the 50s?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're moving on to, as Jared said, the atomic age of
The
horror.
atomic age.
Yeah,
There's a lot of. There's not much in the 50s I care for. It later 50s, and then I do love Creature. Creature, I think, might be the most underrated Universal film. It's so good. But I don't know okay. Mine, I'll just go out. I'm just gonna say The Fly and Invasion of the Body Snatchers are the two that stick out for me. Because I mean, first of all,
and yeah, those two and The Thing from Another Planet. You got to have The Thing. That was a huge movie for that time.
House on Haunted Hill. I could see.
You also got Vincent Price. Yeah, with The Fly and Tingler and House on Haunted Hill and House of Wax, which is probably my favorite.
Man, The Fly and Invasion of the Body Snatchers are so great, and to me, like I've said 1,000 times, probably ahead of their time. Some of these, like the Tingler is pretty. You're right that the Tinglers are good, but the biggest thing for the 50s for me was the birth of the Hammer horror franchise. As I mentioned earlier, I love Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula, and beyond. But yeah, so for me, it's The Fly and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Seth, what did you say?
Invasion of the Body Snatchers is my go-to of the 50s.
Yeah.
So say that or Creature.
Yeah, Creature. That's very good too.
House of Wax is the highest grossing.
House of Wax is my favorite of the 50s.
It's a good one.
I would say it's the fine one.
And see, we're staying away from the Atomic Age movies like Them or the Earth versus the Spider or whatever it's called. Those just didn't really. do much for me.
Them was a big one for that.
Yeah, Them is comical at best, in my opinion. Wait, hold on. Is that's the one with the ant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's comical.
Godzilla, yes. Sean brought up Godzilla. You can't deny that either. So.
Yeah, I feel like Godzilla falls into a whole completely different category, honestly. But if you do that, then you go throw King Kong in there too, in my opinion.
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh gosh, Ed Wood.
It's a classic.
It's a classic in its own right. But
the Fly is definitely up there for me. But like when I think of like the 50s creature features, I can't not think of the Blob.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah, the Blob is.
I totally forgot about that. I didn't even think about that because it's not as good as the remake. I'm just gonna be honest. I think the remake is a million times better.
No, I mean it is.
I mean, you got Steve McQueen, who's like 52, playing a 17-year-old. He's not really 52. I'm just messing around. But you know, it's kind of blah.
He looks better than we will all look at 52. I'm sure.
Well, I think he was like 29, but still.
I think if you talk to a lot of the filmmakers or people who are like inspired by that decade, you got The Thing, Invasion, and the Body Snatchers, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I think are the three that you probably hear most from industry or filmmakers.
Phil Leon says the Cronenberg Fly rules. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, not everybody agrees with that. They think Friday the 13th is better. But anyway, Creature is a masterpiece. I agree. So let's break it down to a couple here. Keith, you don't get too deep into the classics, do you?
I have not. But you also have to comprehend how many other things I've been watching recently that aren't even that old.
Catching up.
He's got a lot of homework to do, kids.
And plus, I have other likes besides horror too that I try to keep up with.
Nobody cares about that.
No, I'll get to it eventually.
Yeah, the fun thing about some of these older movies is they're not even that long. There's some of them are like 70 minutes.
80 minutes tops.
Creature from the Black Lagoon's only an hour. Right,
and I sat and watched, all the Frankenstein movies in one day, and I was done within like 4 hours. So maybe not even then. I'm like, wow, that was fast. I got the rest of the day ahead of me now. So, and they're all pretty decent movies. I mean, I can see a problem with some people nowadays watching that stuff because everything from the mid 60s and up for the most part is in color, even into the late 50s. And, you can tell how, I don't know, there's something charming about the movies of the 30s, 40s, and 50s to me, especially a lot of the set making and the props and the makeup design.
But the industry changed a lot in the late 50s because before they had the motion picture production code, which was really a pain in the ass to a lot of filmmakers. It's not horror, but they had to redo the ending to the original Scarface like 3 times to, get the approval to release it. And then towards like the end of the 50s, then they started, filmmakers were starting to take more risk and foreign films were getting released without needing the code. And so they kind of lost control of it, and then it sort of evolved to the MPAA, and it kind of liberated the industry. They're able to do more after that.
It did start well from here. It does really start getting interesting as far as movies go, because there's a huge shift going into the 1960s. And before we finish the 1950s, are we saying Creature from the Black Lagoon is the kind of defining iconic horror movie of that decade? Because it was 54 was when it was released.
I think if we're going to define the decade, it has to be what was the bulk of the decade, and at the science fiction atomic age was the bulk. So I would go Body Snatchers.
Okay, I can agree with that. The Fly or the Body Snatchers are my two.
I would say The Fly because that kind of fits into that idea too. But House on Haunted Hill was amazing.
Yeah.
I actually saw. I think they colorized it like after it was released, and it looks pretty good colorized.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if that was something Riff Tracks did or something.
Oh,
I don't know if my copy is colorized. This is
mine is not.
mine from as a kid. This is colorized. No, it says black and white. It's colored on the box, but it's black and white.
All right.
It's hard
So
to ignore Vincent Price's presence. I mean, the last truly great horror icon.
oh, and he was all over the decade.
Yeah, and the 60s, though. He carried over with the Corman movies and all that.
Vincent Price.
Yeah, I
is
did a
what- and
bunch
he's
of those
from
Poe
St. Louis.
movies. Bit in the Pendulum, Mask of the Red Death.
So I'm going to name two movies:
In the 60s?
Psycho and Night of the Living Dead.
Those are my two.
Okay, I mean there are some my favorite. That's not even neither one of those are my favorite from the decade because I'm in love with Rosemary's Baby. Absolutely, 100%. My favorite movie of the 1960s. But the 60s started producing some really kind of different type of horror movie. That's when you started-
Trailblazing type movies.
I mean, Psycho leads off the decade. I mean, think about the effect that had on the genre moving forward.
Slasher genre.
Yeah, I mean, people credit Halloween a lot of times, but they forget about Psycho sometimes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But yeah, even there's some holdovers from the last few decades. The Haunting is a really
Haunting,
good movie.
huge one. I didn't even think about 63, Haunting.
Oh man, that's such a good movie.
Yeah.
So well made.
Yeah, very well made. I think Village of the Damned was good.
Because again, you got the Corman, Poe, Vincent Price series in the
House of
60s.
Usher, Pit and the Pendulum. Yeah,
Witchfinder
there's
General. You got Pink and Tom. You've got again Rose. Yeah, I would go Psycho just because it's fucking Hitchcock, and that was kind of the precursor to the slasher and the Gallo films. And
It was also the highest grossing.
Psycho's just so iconic.
it is. But I do you think it's more iconic than Night of the Living Dead?
Yeah. I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Just
Really?
because,
Okay.
like with you mentioning every Halloween, you hear somebody have the Halloween theme and they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
People know the rink rink without
Yeah.
even knowing it's Psycho.
Yeah, because Night of the Living Dead. I mean, I could even say, Last Man on Earth kind of is like it's kind of almost a ripoff of that movie. It's the same decade in some ways. You watch Last Man on Earth. He totally took from I Am Legend.
Yep. Richard Matheson.
So
Yeah.
The Birds was great.
Birds, it doesn't hold up though. If you ask me, I got it on Blu-ray, and some movies shouldn't be on Blu-ray.
Bren mentioned Black Sunday, so you got
Oh
Bob.
yeah, hell
And then
yeah.
you've also got, I mean, it's not going to define the decade, but that's when Blood Feast came out too in the 60s, right? So they got the whole gore.
Herschel.
Gordon Lewis.
Yeah,
So it's a lot of stuff happened in the 60s. Like I said, it was like a turn.
it was a huge turn for horror. I mean, a big time. There's a lot of good stuff. And Chris Hall, and I love this guy. Don't forget, Hammer did rule the decade with all their sequels.
Yeah.
But really, as far as defining the decade, I think there are two, probably Psycho more than anything. But Night of the Living Dead is a legendary movie in its own right. I mean, if not for that movie, we wouldn't have the modern zombie. There would be no Walking Dead.
It started the midnight movie craze too. Like it was like some of the first midnight movie.
Yeah. So I mean, you could go either way with those two movies. I think those are the two that really define the '60s. As far as
I would give it to those two. Psycho and Night of the Living Dead to me are the battle.
Yeah.
Man.
Maybe.
And I hate to think anything's better than Night of the Living Dead, but yeah, Psycho is pretty hard
Should I
to
put
top.
it to a vote on the Facebook page? Put the two next to each other, like we do the brackets. See who gets more votes.
Those aren't even the same type of movies.
I know.
Yeah.
Apples and oranges.
You can't
Thanks, Renee.
compare
Apples
those.
and oranges.
I think they're both great and influential in their own different ways. I mean, Psycho was a studio-produced movie.
Yeah.
Was the influence to Halloween. John Carpenter took a lot of influence from that. It was kind of like the very beginning of the slashers, whereas Night of the Living Dead was an independent horror movie. You know, not too bad for a group of friends getting together every weekend and working their asses off. You know, and it's very iconic. I love that movie so much.
Yeah, filmmaking wise, I go Psycho. Hitchcock was a genius. It just.
So if you put the two movies in front of you and answer this in the comments below, anybody watching, you have Psycho and you have Night of the Living Dead. Which are you watching? I probably will go with Psycho also because I prefer the later Romero movies like Dawn of the Dead. So
for me, it would be Night of the Living Dead if I had a choice.
We got Bren Peterson saying I'm voting Psycho. Sean Stiff voting Romero. So
obviously Psycho's a better movie, but if I'm gonna if I had a chance to watch either one right now, I'd probably
both groundbreaking in their own right though. Yeah. So Night of the Living, we got another vote for Night of the Living Dead. I'm trying to make this last as long as possible because the 70s is where it's gonna get really, really hard as far as picking the decade. So
we're gonna start getting into it.
I know it's gonna start getting really interesting here directly. So I don't know. I think it's an even mix. I am going to do that tonight. I'm going to put the matchup. I'm going to do that for all of them, I think, because people like picking things. People like lists and people like picking things, even if it's apples and oranges. I'm going to say Psycho for myself. I like Psycho quite a bit.
I would say Psycho.
Yeah. What do you know?
Wow.
That shirt on, man. He's picking Psycho.
I am picking Psycho.
He's so creator.
It's not like I put this shirt on and be like, which one am I going to wear for this question tonight?
I call bullshit.
I don't even think I own a
It's
Psycho
the most
shirt.
classic shirt I have. So. Is that new?
Yeah.
1 of 37. All right.
Yep.
You guys ready to dive into the 70s? Because this is going to be a bumpy ride.
Boy.
All right. I'm going to come right out and say it.
I know my first two.
Well, mine is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Interesting choice.
When I think of the 70s, that's the first one that pops to mind. The 70s, in my eyes, were a gritty, rough time in America. So, plus it's fucked up. It's one of the most fucked up movies I had ever seen until Hellraiser. And let me tell you, my mom showed that movie to me when I was 6 years old. So it probably was the first 70s horror movie I'd ever seen. I mean, there's plenty of other ones. I'm not going to rob you guys by mentioning names, but let's go around the table. Seth, what do you got?
Well, I got a couple here. So
name
Texas
one, and then we'll go around the table.
Just name one.
Just name one. Yeah.
All right. I'll start with.
There's 10 defining the decade. If you have my opinion, but go ahead. Sorry.
I'll start with Halloween.
Okay. I knew somebody was going to say Halloween.
That's fair.
All right. Jared.
Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the only other more fucked up movie than Texas Chainsaw Massacre of that decade.
Only movie I would like to go see in the theater in 1973. I mean, go back in time to see a movie in the theater, that'd be the one. I've said it before. Nate.
Jaws.
No.
The other three you picked. I got 4. That makes the 4th one.
All right, let's see if Keith can bring us the 5th.
Alien.
Oh.
That's the 5th. Those are the 5 to me. Those are the 5.
Alien's one of my favorite movies.
Alien is it came out on my birthday. It is.
They're
probably,
all different, completely different movies.
That's what the 70s brought us. That's what the 70s did to us.
So different. How do you pick defining one? They're all 5 different genres.
And we still left a couple out.
Oh yeah.
The Omen, Night of the Living, or Dawn of the Dead.
The Evil Dead.
No,
was that 81.
81.
Oh, was it? I thought it was 79.
Yeah, Evil Dead.
Black Christmas.
Yeah, I'm striking.
Scary.
The Crazies.
The Brood. Phantasm was another one that came out in the 79. Did you say Black Christmas?
Yeah, Black Christmas and Wicker Man.
Rabid. The Wicker Man. Well, not a fan of that.
The Crazies.
Oh, I love the Wicker Man.
The Crazies. There's a remake of Nosferatu as well.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of, for me and Jared, there's a lot of good Italian horror that came out in the 70s.
Suspiria, there's another one. Somebody
There you
says
go.
Suspiria.
Yep.
Deep Red is another one that came out in 75.
Zombie, 79.
Carrie.
Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. That's a good one. Keep them coming, guys. The 70s were a great decade, and they took what the 70s did by turning the genre into a whole new light, because it was kind of, the atomic age wasn't as a big of a deal as the gothic monsters age, right? And they were still, getting those movies out there. And then the 60s says, well, let's try some new things. Thanks Alfred Hitchcock and thanks George Romero, because we wouldn't have movies like Halloween and Dawn of the Dead and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I don't know, any of these movies. There's 5 solid movies, just like Nate was saying. That
Carrie, I love Carrie.
Carrie's a really good. So Seth, what were your other ones that you were gonna? I'm sure we mentioned them all.
I think they were all mentioned. Dawn of the Dead, Black Christmas.
I'm not a big fan of Black Christmas, but that's okay.
Oh, what the fuck else was there?
Chris Hall said, I think the subgenre that spawned the most ripoffs should define the decade. But the thing is, every one of those big movies had ripoffs.
So Halloween?
Devil movies after The Exorcist, everybody making animal attack movies after Jaws, slash movies after Halloween, redneck stuff after Chainsaw. I think I cut Seth off.
Well, no, that's what the '80s ended up becoming, was the era of the ripoff, though. Cashing in on the stuff from the '70s for the most part. I mean, that's what the slasher genre really is.
Phantasm.
Yeah.
Phantasm. That's a fantastic movie with PH.
I think looking at it culturally, Exorcist and Jaws had the biggest impact of the '70s.
Those were the only 2 that I had when I first thought of it.
But was it because they were seen by more people?
Yeah, I mean, they were big novels,
sure.
they were big movies, they were.
Jaws is the highest grossing horror.
Yeah.
Jaws changed cinema, period.
Benchley's novel was amazing. Friedkin's novel was amazing. Like it got people into the theaters.
Are we going live on the wrong night? Because we got people chiming in like crazy here, and I'm loving it. I'm just watching my feed go up and up. I've seen Blackula, Let's Scare Jessica to Death. Torso's a great movie. It's underrated.
Torso's underrated.
Yeah, Blackula, Dracula AD 72 is a fun movie. Yeah, there's a lot. I'm loving. So we're getting into the meat of the horror genre right
Dracula
now.
AD 72.
That movie's out of control. I love it. I love
I do
it.
too. It's not
Night
bad.
on Olympus, Gargoyles, Carrie. There's so many mentioned here. The 70s, The Hills Have Eyes. There's so many that are mentioned.
Last House on the Left.
Last House.
Yeah.
I don't think but
no, I wouldn't say that. I think I agree with. Alien's a whole new ballpark, but I think I agree with Jaws for sure, and probably The Exorcist. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is when I think of anything from the 1970s, that's the first movie that pops in my head for some reason. And I couldn't even tell you what's the first movie that popped in my head from the 80s, because the 80s, it's just, there's so much shit.
Well, Chainsaw's kind of like what Night of the Living Dead is to the 60s. It was like more the underground midnight movie, whereas Jaws and Exorcist were everybody watched
big blockbusters. Yeah.
So if you can find
Don't forget Fulci's Zombie, 1979.
Yeah, everybody saw that, right?
I saw a list online the worst virus movies, and that was one of them, which I was upset by. I may have thrown something across the room. No, I didn't.
I guess Exorcist wins, because if you ask half the fan base, they'll say Jaws isn't a horror movie nowadays. So.
You know what's funny is I got an image from like 3 or 4 years ago when we started the Horror Syndicate. It was our biggest post ever on the Facebook, and it was a picture of the Jaws poster. Says, "Is this horror?" And we had like 100 some odd comments on it, and it just went. People were going back and I'm going to do it again. Let's start some trouble. Yeah, Jaws to me, I've said it before on other shows. Jaws is a movie that transcends horror, because it's more than just a horror movie. It's a top 5 movie for me completely. And this is a movie that's competing in my list with movies that are complete series, like we talked about before, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. But the Jaws there's a little bit of everything in that movie, and Murray Hamilton. So
Montgomery asks, "Oh yeah, does anyone know which Karate Kid actor debuted in Last House?" Martin Cove.
Yeah, the sensei. I don't know his name.
Martin Cove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Played one of the goofy cops. Last House on the Left was.
Played one of the goofy cops.
Yeah, that movie was such a disappointment for me. I remember seeing the trailer, like looking up horror trailers when we started getting online, because this was about 2002, 2003 when I got it. And I was like, well, there's a legendary one, Last House on the Left, because I watched the trailer and they have that to prevent from screaming, keep saying it's only a movie, it's only a movie. So I was like, God damn it, this is gonna be a good movie. I go to Best Buy, buy the DVD, watched them, like, well, that happened to me. So that's how I felt. Then I watched the remake and the same thing, same feeling. Is it the bad sensei guy? Yeah. What was his name in the movie, Karate Kid?
Shit. What was his name?
John Kreese.
John Kreese.
Yeah, that's right. He wasn't as bad as his buddy from Nam, though. Let's not forget Karate Kid 3.
Oh, yeah, right.
So that dude was an ass. The Steven Seagal looking mother. Could they not afford Steven Seagal?
The ponytail guy that was in John Carpenter's Vampires.
Is that him?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
He was the main vampire in John Carpenter's.
Alec or Valak?
Valak.
Yeah. I love I think that's a really good vampire movie. Anybody else like that one?
Which one?
John Carpenter's.
Oh, John Carpenter's Vampires. It's all right.
Get a little bit of mahogany there.
Okay, Ebony.
Are we? So let's put the final word on this. The 1970s, The Exorcist and Jaws.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
and so
can agree with that.
People on Facebook, is Jaws a horror movie? Let us know now as we move on to the 80s.
Which is another big clusterfuck.
Well, before that, I'm gonna read. Jaws kept me out of the water for years. It's from Phil, and The Exorcist traumatized me, and I blame my dad. Jeremy Tidwell says The Last House on the Left is an odd film because it has. Now this is going up too fast. Sorry. Mm-hmm. It has the graphic horror, then cuts to the bowling cops with the crazy upbeat music. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Didn't they have to like ride with chickens at some point? Yeah. I probably will never. Steven Stiff says, neither I abstain. I will wait for a good film. Aliens or Halloween?
Halloween's my favorite of the two, but Alien's probably better film. But I don't think Alien films define that decade, though.
No.
Science fiction films.
People will say
Star Wars.
Star Wars defines the decade period.
Definitely Star Wars.
So as far as horror goes, I'm thinking it's The Exorcist. But who didn't watch Jaws on Saturday mornings on Channel 11 or whatever? You know, I did back in the 80s. Speaking of the 80s, are we ready to tackle the biggest decade in horror history?
Yeah,
I think so.
It's tough. But I mean, there's so many. Mine is obvious. It's obvious, but I'll let you guys go first. Let's see what Keith has to say first.
I don't think mine's really defining the decade. I'm just going to pick it because it was my first memory of horror, which is Evil Dead 2.
Oh.
That was like
That's
my first
coming up in the
movie.
90s, and obviously Army of Darkness defined the 90s. So anyway.
So that defines your 80s. That's fair.
Yeah, Evil Dead 2. That's okay. I didn't see that movie until way later. But Seth, what about you?
Honestly, I think Friday the 13th defined the 80s, but I'm gonna take a note from Keith here, and I'm gonna go with something else. I'm gonna go with American Werewolf in London because it's my favorite horror movie of all time. So I have to kind of give a shout out to that.
Nice.
Sean Stiff says Reanimator.
Reanimator.
Well, I think.
Great movie.
Okay. The 80s is definitely the decade of the slasher. So to me, it has to be a slasher. Nate, what do you got?
Favorite film of the 80s is Nightmare on Elm Street, but I agree it's the decade of the slasher. And if you're talking slashers, Friday the 13th defined the decade. There were 8 films. Mm-hmm. Even some of the ripoffs started following Friday more than it followed Halloween. Mm-hmm. I think the hockey mask, the all that stuff became so synonymous with horror, the genre itself. The name Jason. You had Clark Griswold impersonating him by the end of the decade. You had all this stuff. I think you had the spoofs, Sleepaway Camp, all that stuff. I think I'm bigger. Nightmare is my movie.
Yeah.
But I have to say Friday the 13th is defining.
I agree with you on that. Because Nightmare is absolutely my favorite movie of the decade, my favorite movie of all time as far as horror goes.
My favorite movie as well. Yeah.
Jared, what about you? Friday the 13th, I mean, it is the 80s.
I mean, I'm piggybacking Nathan technically, but I mean, there's two heavy hitters. You got Freddy and you got Jason. And Jason definitely like crossed a lot of pop culture, like he was saying with what was it, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation when he wore the mask.
Yeah.
Eddie Furlong was dressed up like him in the Halloween scene in Pet Sematary 2. That's 1992. Yeah. So I mean, his I think Jason, the Friday the 13th series was still felt today more than any of the other. Maybe Halloween comes close, but that's from the 70s. But I think it's still felt today. I mean, there's how many times have we talked about Friday the 13th on this show and past shows?
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean, the only other thing that was bigger in the 80s and slashers was Stephen King, and his film stories are so wide out that you can't just pick one.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, well, it's The Shining or Pet Sematary or Christine.
Well, because The Shining could be considered for this as well.
Yeah, but I don't think there's so many people who don't like The Shining, but I also don't think that The Shining defines the decade.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's funny. I wanted to tell you, my kids caught me watching your Shining painting the other day, and we ended up watching it. We watched it in it chapter 2. I was like, "What do you guys want to watch next?" And my son's like, "Hey, we watched that guy painting The Shining. Can we watch that?" So based on that, they loved it too. Oddly enough, my 6 and 11-year-old love The Shining.
Have they watched Dr. Sleep yet?
No, I don't. There's a scene in Dr. Sleep that kind of bothered me towards the beginning with the baby, and I don't want to put them on that yet. So I try not to throw spoilers out there. But yeah. So yeah, I think without a doubt it's got to be Jason, and just Jason in general. It's not Friday the 13th.
Just the character Jason.
The character Jason.
Best film or anything like that. I'm just saying that the definition of the decade.
No, because there's so many great films. The 80s were a huge decade for movie. The best movie of the decade, in my opinion, is The Thing.
The Thing.
Without a doubt.
Bingo.
Yeah, it has the best effects. It's got a great story, and it has I like endings like that. It has an awesome ending. You know? So, but
sipping Irish whiskey with your best friend in the snow.
Friday the 13th just kept going and going and going. There's only 2 years in the 80s we didn't get Friday the 13th. You know, what was it, 87 and 83, I think? And those years suffered, I think. I mean, the fact that there was no Friday the 13th in 1987 is probably why Dream Warriors was so good.
Yeah, Dream Warriors and Hellraiser.
Yeah. But like, could you imagine if there was another Friday the 13th, you know, that year? I love, that's one of the things, I love your 1988 poster, because this is what happens in the 80s. He made a poster, it's Freddy from the Dream Master, and he's, you know, get like all the souls, you know, the part at the end when they're coming out, spoiler alert, they're coming out of his body. Well, he's got like Pinhead coming out, and Chucky, and every movie monster from 1988, because 1988 probably, there was a big debate we had a few years ago. It was 81 or 88, the big year of the 1980s, and I think it was the 88. When you think about the breaking down the decade, you got 81 had Evil Dead, American Werewolf in London, all the werewolf movies almost, with the exception of Silver Bullet. And then the 88 had all the slashers coming. I mean, Halloween, Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser.
Well, you also introduced new characters like
Pinhead, Pumpkinhead, Chucky.
Pumpkinhead, yeah.
I think 88's the bigger year of the biggest year of the decade. There's 3 you could kind of argue with 85 being in there as a big one as well, because Roy Burns came out in that year.
And Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah, Return of the Living Dead. So that's another thing. That was another thing about that's great about the 80s. We got the kind of spinoff from Night of the Living Dead, the Russo spinoff with Return of the Living Dead. And then we got a George Romero movie. Totally 2 different zombie movies, but 2 really great, both kind of iconic zombie movies in 85. Yeah.
We could totally do just an entire episode on the 80s.
Yeah.
Oh, we could.
Sean Stiff said nobody saw the thing in the 80s, though, and he's right. Like, John says it was a flop. It was a bomb. So.
It was a early mid 2000s when I saw. I think it was 04 when I saw the thing, and my wife, oddly enough, was the one telling me, "You need to watch this. You need to watch this." I was like, "Ah." She's like, "It's got Kurt Russell." I was like, "Sold." Sold. Nobody better than Kurt Russell, in my opinion.
The highest grossing of the 80s was Poltergeist.
Shit, how did I forget Poltergeist?
Yeah, that's another one. That's another one.
That's actually surprising.
Yeah, you got Poltergeist.
I always forget about Poltergeist.
When you get a guy like Toby Hooper and Steven Spielberg together and put them on the same project, I mean, it's Toby Hooper's movie, of course, but what a great movie. It's a family ghost story movie anybody could watch.
It's so fun.
It really is. I love that movie. It's one of the ones that my friends would come over and watch a lot. That one and The Shining back in high school. Because I was the guy, I hope you guys were the same. Let's go to Ray's house to watch scary movies.
That was my house. I had no parental supervision, so I'm like, you haven't seen anything.
July 4th weekend, 1996, right after I got my license, we were having a party at a friend's house. His parents were out of town. They're like talking about Friday the 13th. Ray's got them all on VHS. Well, they didn't say VHS back then. On tape.
On tape.
Ray's got them on tape. You want to go home and get them? 2 a.m. I'm like, yeah, I'll go home and get them.
On video.
Yeah. I got grounded for a while. Wasn't supposed to be at 3 o'clock in the morning.
So we also got Creep Show in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the 80s are chock full of movies.
The Fly.
There's a bunch of my favorite Italian horror that come from the 80s with Demons and City of the Living Dead and
Beyond.
Yeah, we could go on. We maybe have to do an 80s episode eventually. Because the 80s are just packed full. I mean, and some of the movies from the 80s aren't even that good, but we still love them. Like Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3.
The Stuff is great.
Cujo, They Live. My Bloody Valentine.
I wouldn't consider They Live a
yeah, it's not.
movie.
I see it more as an action
great
movie.
movies, not My Bloody Valentine or The Prowler.
The Prowler. TCM2.
The Prowler is great. Shut your face.
All right, so we're on in Pet Sematary 89, capped off the decade in a great way. Let's see.
Fair.
Nightmare 4 was the last best sequel in the series. I agree. That's my favorite of the sequels. Mm-hmm. Poltergeist. Saw Poltergeist. It's a Halloween 2 in the drive-thru. Oh, yeah. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Phil Leon just dropped the mic. That's another fun movie.
Yes. Love it. Love it.
So back to, are we in agreement that Jason is the defining...
Defines a decade.
He defines the decade. He's a force of nature. He defines the decade. Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th. Roy Burns, Pamela Voorhees. I almost called her Pamela Burns. Maybe.
Different movie.
A different movie. Yeah.
That could be a totally different movie.
Jason Lives is my favorite.
Oh, Roy.
Let's go ahead. Which one do you think is the best? Keith.
New Blood. I'm weird.
Yeah. Seth.
I like New Blood.
Oh, Friday the 13th?
Yeah.
Final chapter.
Yeah. Nate.
Jason Lives.
I don't even have to ask you, Jared. I already know.
You know.
Yeah. So it's 2-2-1. And we'll move on to the 90s. You guys are ready for the 90s. And I think there's one definitive answer for the 90s. But before that, you on Facebook, what is your favorite Friday the 13th movie? Comment and let us know below. Okay? Get in on the conversation. Ted Higgins says part 2. Part 2 has grown in favor for me. I was never a big fan. I'm not a fan of part 3. All right. 90s.
There's a lot of survivors in part 2.
It's true.
2 films from the 90s.
2 films. Okay. Go ahead.
I already know what one of them is.
The first half, Silence of the Lambs. The second half, Scream.
I was literally going to say.
Yeah.
That's
the Scream came out in the last 4 years, so it inspired everything after that. But the first 6 years, 5 years, whatever, Silence of the Lambs changed so much. All the serial killer stuff, and it kind of killed the horror genre for a bit. It killed slashers because no one could Hannibal.
Yeah, the 90s was kind of dead for half the decade when it comes to horror.
I mean, Candyman came out in '92.
Yeah,
But
but it
I
didn't
don't-
have the impact that.
No, it did.
Freddy
I
or
love the
Jason
movies.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. I think Scream. I mean,
Slasher
okay,
genre was dead by 1989, in my opinion.
yeah, I agree with that because I mean, well, Freddy's Dead and Jason Goes to Hell came out in '91 and '93, I think, and then Michael Myers tried to hang around with 3 pretty crappy movies, in my opinion. Curse of Michael Myers. I love that movie. It's the first one I ever saw in the theater. H2O I do not like, and I do not like Resurrection. So he tried to hang around. I think Scream. Well, Scream is also the reason H2O and Resurrection were the way they were.
Yeah.
But I think Scream is
I
the
could see
one that
that.
defines the decade.
That's
for
the
sure, because-
first movie I think of.
How many? Well,
It's my favorite of the decade.
and it's a great movie. And it's how many? It spawned 3 sequels and so many other urban legends. And I Know You Did Last Summer and Valentine.
Valentine.
It was
yeah.
like almost the same effect that Halloween Psycho had. In the
Low was basically Scream Part 3.
Which one?
H2O.
H2O was just a
Oh.
Scream movie with Michael Myers.
Let's make Scream or Halloween like Scream. I like the Scream movies, but I didn't like that they threw it into the Halloween movies at all. I'm not. Those are 2 of my least favorite Halloween movies. And it's sad because they brought Jamie Lee Curtis back for that.
At the end of the decade, you've got Blair
Witchmaster?
Witch Project.
Yeah,
Blair Witch
which
Project.
totally. The Blair Witch was another one that kind of changed the course of filmmaking and horror because
POV filming.
found footage has been around for a while with movies like Cannibal
Holocaust.
In the
For
last
instance, yeah.
broadcast.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. But Blair Witch kind of brought it back, and more people. It's a really cheap way to make movies. Not cheap, cost effective or cost efficient, whatever.
It's cheap.
It was
I
the
mean,
highest grossing.
It's
in the 90s.
effective. Blair Witch was
Yep.
more than Scream.
Yep. I was shocked
Wow.
by that.
Oh yeah, well,
Made more money than Scream.
Yeah.
Ah.
I mean, I can double
Or
check,
they
but
just basing
think
it on
about-
how much it costs versus how much it made. Or
no, just like I was just going off of box office.
think about how the viral marketing for that movie with
yeah,
the Blair Witch. Do you remember 1999, the summer of '99, with them saying that it's a real story? And I mean, who wouldn't want to go see a movie that is real footage?
Yeah,
of
the marketing
people-
around Blair Witch Project
Yeah,
was
I don't
pretty
know.
I went
impressive.
in.
I was
They had
probably
a
sucking.
documentary about it and
I was
everything.
probably sucking my thumb somewhere, so I
Yeah,
don't
you
know.
were 3. Yeah, but I'll never forget that. We went opening night, and I'll never forget thinking it was real, and then the next morning seeing Heather in a damn Steak and Shake commercial. Well, she's still alive, because we thought it was real, and then finally the newspapers the next day and the days after said it was not a real story. I thought it was real.
you know what's funny about Blair Witch is it didn't spawn a bunch of rip-offs, but a bunch of spoofs. Like Paranormal Activity kind of brought the boom of found footage back.
Yeah.
But like there wasn't a lot of found footage after Blair Witch that I remember. But between Blair Witch and Paranormal
No, 'cause
Activity,
there's a good 7-year gap in there between Blair
Yeah.
Witch and
At least.
I didn't even think about that, but I don't know. I for me, it's going to be a Scream that defines the '90s. I mean, the '90s are one of the worst decades I think in horror history, in my opinion. But
I might
But
have
it
been.
also gave us one of my favorite horror
don't you
movies.
dare say Tremors.
I was thinking about it, but no.
Okay.
No, but yeah, that's interesting that you say that though. Like, there is a movie that everybody could kind of pick out of that decade as their favorite that wouldn't describe it at all, and mine would be Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight.
Mm-hmm. That's a good movie. I mean, but again, I don't think it nothing measures up to Scream in my opinion.
No,
Because
of
I mean,
course
there's
not.
I mean,
with Silence of the Lambs, you run into it's not horror. It's not horror.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you get that with Misery also.
Well,
even though
like
it's
to me,
Scream.
my favorite serial killer movie of the '90s is Seven.
Mhm.
But does anyone consider that a horror? I mean,
I don't think so.
One of those ones up in the air.
It's. I mean, I don't think it is just because it's not from their point of view or their perspective. It's more of like a thriller mystery.
Yeah, but Silence of the Lambs is kind of in the same breath.
It is kind
mean,
of.
They're very similar. I can
He
see
also had,
where.
Sixth Sense came out in the 90s.
Yeah, I was about to
90s.
say that actually. If I mean, do we count that
Yes.
as a horror? Sixth
Yeah.
The
Sense.
Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
It actually
Those-
it made the most in the 90s. I must have looked
Okay,
something
well,
weird.
that's a horror movie. There's a lot of good movies from the '90s. I mean, what about Jacob's Ladder?
Great
Maybe
movie.
like-
Misery is a great one.
Misery started off the '90s.
Misery's
strong.
amazing.
Bram Stoker's Dracula. I've always liked it. Event
I love
Horizon,
that one. Nightbreed.
Nightbreed. What about From Dusk Till Dawn?
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Big
Sex
character
Machine.
guy, so yeah.
In the Mouth of Madness, Event Horizon.
Another good
World
one.
of Illusion, Frighteners,
Frighteners.
Gremlins 2.
People Under the Stairs.
New
Hey,
Nightmare.
I mean, the '90s do have a great decade. I think was that the '90 was the year that the remake of Night of the Living Dead came out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a
Yeah,
lot of them are
90 or 91.
more being discovered now versus back then. I think horror did fall out of favor.
Yeah, so like Delamore, and Audition.
Cemetery Man.
Absolutely. What about Ravenous? That's another one that I was thinking of last night.
Great.
Ravenous is one that kind of
Wow, that's one I haven't thought of in a while.
yeah. Would you put that in the horror genre? Shopping Mall was the '80s.
Vampire cannibal movie. I mean, in many ways.
Yeah. Flatliners is another. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff that came from the '90s, but they're all afterthoughts compared to something like a Scream or a
Blair Witch.
Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs is another one like Jaws for me because there's so much more to it than it's. I never thought of it as a horror movie until I became a part of the community through Facebook and all, and running the horror side. But yeah, it's now in Hannibal and Red Dragon and what's the one from the '80s?
I do think Scream takes it just because it
And Hunter.
inspired so much to
Bad
follow
Hunter.
it.
It's my
Yeah.
birthday horror movie.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on to the 2000s, what movie came out the year you were born? Seth, go. Name a horror movie that came out the year you were born. The Shining and Friday the 13th for me.
You guys can go. I have to think.
Keith already said. What year were you born?
83.
83.
Oh, so you're
that's
younger than
a
me.
rough year.
Carrie.
What is it?
Carrie.
Carrie. Okay, 76. Jared, come on. The Beyond.
The Thing, Poltergeist, Creep
Oh,
Show.
you were 82.
Say,
Seth-
Seth, you've got like Jared, Christine, Sleepaway Camp.
Did you say Jared?
Oh,
Yes.
Seth.
He said
Sorry.
Jared.
Seth, I'm sorry.
Oh, Slumber Party Massacre came out in 82 also.
There you go. Hell of a movie.
Halloween 3, which is my favorite of all the sequels.
We didn't even talk about Halloween 3. How do we miss that? It's not decade defining, but it's a good movie. I think it's lost the stigma of being a terrible movie because it never was.
I've got Scream, Dusk Till Dawn, The Craft, Frighteners.
The Craft is good. I like that movie.
From Dusk Till Dawn. So you 95?
96.
96?
Or how about you people in Facebook land? What horror movie came out the year that you were born? Let us know in the comments. Do we have some already? Is this Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, Death Dream, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Deranged, 1974? Okay, so because we're going to move on to the 2000s, which proved very difficult for me. I don't know if it did for you guys. Because the 2000s were mashed full of all kinds of different stuff.
Oh yeah, there's so much going on that.
Yeah, there's good movies, but some of them like actually I might be a year off, but The House of the Devil, was that 2009 or 2010?
I just watched that, dang it.
Probably my favorite movie of the decade, but that doesn't define the decade. I would almost say either Saw or Paranormal Activity because of the series ran through most of the decade.
House of the Devil's 09.
09, well, that's my favorite movie.
You had J-horror coming in. You had torture porn. You had remake. You had zombies. You had
Hostel,
found
The
footage.
Ring.
Those big five subgenres. Like, how do you pick?
I think remakes dominated the decade.
Yeah.
I think that was the big thing of the decade with Halloween, Amityville, Dawn of the Dead, Texas
Chainsaw.
So,
Yeah, there's so many remakes. I think that's what defines that decade. And why did we get such a full decade of remakes?
But like Nathan was saying, we also had a barrage of redos of Japanese horror movies.
That's true.
The J-horror thing, but the J-horror thing didn't seem to last very long.
No, because we only got a few and then a couple sequels.
But you also in that decade had the French New Wave of horror with High Tension and Inside and
Martyrs.
and Martyrs and God, so many.
God, Martyrs is
really
fucking
good.
amazing.
So when we look at the decade, though, well, like what sticks out for you?
I think Saw or Paranormal Activity, but people hate Saw.
Yeah, for better or worse, though, that is the decade. It started in 04
Yes.
and pretty much ended the decade.
see, I grew up in that decade. I'm gonna say Saw and Poltergeist because that's all I went and saw in theaters.
Poltergeist?
No,
Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity.
Ah,
He said Poltergeist.
Did
though.
I?
yeah, he did.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Peter Wilmer forgives you.
Oh my god.
Yeah, well, it's funny though if you pay attention to the when Saw came out and the Paranormal Activities, Saw kind of handed it off to Paranormal Activity for a few years because they were the longest running.
Yeah.
Every single year in October, you'd get a Saw, and then all of a sudden Paranormal Activity.
But then you had the Wrong Turns also that were doing one
Yeah, but
a
those
year.
weren't theatrical.
They weren't necessarily as popular, but
Yeah, I remember
think the Wrong
growing.
Turns, and you got to think of Adam Green's movies too. Like
Yeah, you had that small slasher with Behind the Mask and Hatchet and Chrome Skull.
Chrome Skull.
Chrome
yeah.
Skull was good.
Laid to rest. But my favorites of that time are High Tension, 28 Days Later, The Descent,
The Descent was mentioned. Yeah.
and Shaun of the Dead, probably.
Yeah.
And the Hills Have Eyes remake.
That was good. That was one of the best remakes of all time, in my opinion. And Andre Bickley says The Grudge, The Ring, and Boogeyman. Was that a Japanese remake? It was a terrible movie, either way.
It might have.
the 80s Boogeyman movie.
No, it had the guy from Seventh Heaven in it.
Yeah.
Barry something or other.
I would say out of those, The Ring was the only one that was like a big cultural thing.
Yeah, The Grudge didn't do well here.
Grudge didn't do as well here, although I like Ju-on a lot.
Ju-on is a good one.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, there are a lot of good movies from the decade. I agree with Nate on High Tension because that movie, unfortunately, it's one that you can only watch every 10 years or so because, well, I watched it the one time and I was like, I need to show this to somebody else. And I showed it to somebody else and it just did nothing for me.
And you also have, there's something else big. Of course, Devil's Rejects was a big title for that decade.
I'm gonna say The Strangers, The Mist, and American Psycho.
American Psycho's dope.
I love American Psycho.
I love American Psycho as well. I think it came out in '99 though, didn't it? Or was it 2000?
2000.
Was it?
2000.
Yeah.
My phone just lost internet, so I can't see the chat.
Let's see.
I'm restarting it. So hopefully hopefully I don't lose internet. So anyway, back 2000s.
The most popular one of that decade is Shaun of the Dead, isn't it? Didn't you do?
Yeah, it probably is a horror comedy, but it comes on the heels of movies like 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
Dawn of the Dead remake. And
I'm not a big Saw fan, but I think Saw defines that decade.
Like when you guys talking about like Friday getting a movie every year and people went to the movies every year, that's what I did was Saw. Every freaking year something came out and I went and saw it.
Yep.
My wife was a big fan of the Saw movies and Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity, I saw like 3 and then I was like, okay, I'm done with these.
We saw them all, I think, in the theater, except for the Ghost Dimension, and so they're both coming back. I know there's another Paranormal Activity in the works, and then that's other Saw movie.
Yeah.
What is it called?
Spiral.
Yeah.
Which I'm
It's
actually
intriguing
interested
'cause
in.
it's got Samuel L. Jackson in it.
And Chris Rock.
Chris Rock.
Chat
so-
in chat we got Hostel, Cabin Fever,
about
Dracula 2000,
Hostel.
Resident Evil
Dracula
franchise.
2000.
Resident Evil franchise. Well, if Brian was here, he'd definitely vote for the Resident Evil franchise.
I was gonna say that's a touchy topic with the Resident Evil franchise.
I loved Hostel and Hostel 2. I thought those were great movies. Not a huge Eli Roth guy, but I did like Cabin Fever as well. It was,
Fond memories.
I got
of
tricked into
Hostel.
seeing that, but that's a whole different story. I think Saw is the decade defining. I mean, and I hope we don't turn into the 2010s and say, Paranormal Activity or the decade defining because it's
Insidious, The Conjuring.
See, I would say we're not there yet, but I would say the
God.
Conjuring universe.
Yeah.
God bless America.
Well, let's not get there just yet. I'm gonna look something up real fast. So give me a second. I want to look at our top movies of that decade because I'm curious what is number one of the 2000s.
Oh yeah.
So give me 1 second.
And if
Freddy
my
vs. Jason was pretty big back then too.
Which one?
Freddy vs. Jason.
03.
Yeah.
and if my information's correct and I didn't look at something wrong, in the 2000s Hannibal was the highest grossing horror movie.
Jesus.
Does that count?
Really?
Does that count?
Frailty
Hannibal's-
was a really good movie that
Hannibal's
nobody
a
really
decent
saw.
movie. It's
Which one?
Yeah, Frailty's good.
Frailty, yeah.
Frailty is a really good movie. That's another one that surprised me.
Pan's Labyrinth came out in that time too.
Yeah, that was a little bit later in the 2000s, but yeah, that hit the 2000.
Trick or Treat came out that decade too.
Yeah.
Which one?
Trick or treat.
Trick or Treat.
Trick or treat.
That's another one that's picking up steam now because I don't think it was well thought of when it came out because I think is it Brad Doherty or whatever his name is?
Yeah, Brad
I
Doherty.
think he wanted to make another one, but
He did
never
Krampus.
yeah, he couldn't find funding or something like that.
Michael Doherty.
but Michael Doherty,
Was it
yeah,
Michael? Yeah.
because that
I think Brad Doherty was a basketball player.
I think you're right. I think that movie was the winner for our 2000s bracket. So
That movie did not go to the theater.
We didn't.
It didn't get a theatrical run. Release.
Oh.
I mean, I think it came out like 2 or 3 years after it was made. It was like shelved.
That
If I remember right.
sounds about right. Let's
Which
see. I'm
makes
looking at the list. The top rated movie from the 2000s is Saw. On our list, it's Saw. So there you go. Saw, Martyrs, and then The Ring, and then The Descent. No, The Ring, then The Descent. So there you go. There's your top 5 from that decade. All right. So
Wow.
moving on to 2010s. How difficult was this for you? Everybody else?
It's
I
tough.
actually have more to pick from in this decade than I did the last
Well,
decade.
this is your time to shine then.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to call out every movie.
Well, I pulled up our top 50.
I think James
So-
Wan defines this decade, but the
I would,
Insidious
yeah.
Conjuring series, as far as like, because there's like you've got the new art house horror stuff, but they're so different. How do you pick which one?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think we're too far removed enough from this decade for me to make a good choice,
That's a good point.
but I definitely have a couple in mind.
All right, we'll shoot them out.
Get out.
Mother,
Okay.
Get
Love
out.
Mother,
The Neon Demon,
Okay.
Love the Neon Demon.
Get Out. Yeah.
Yes.
Get Out, I absolutely think is one of the defining movies of the decade. Okay. Seth, what did you have any?
I'm not really too caught up on modern. I think the one that really kind of defined this decade would be The Conjuring, even though it's kind of overrated to me, but
No, I think you're right, actually, especially since it's spawning an entire universe with 3 Annabelle movies, 2 Conjuring
Yeah.
movies, and
But I don't think we would have had. I think The Conjuring's my favorite, but I think Insidious kickstarted
Insidious. You know what?
the whole supernatural horror haunted house.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Although Paranormal Activity could have been this. Well, actually, I remember Insidious felt like Paranormal Activity to me at first until it turned into Poltergeist. It came over. But all those other movies like Get Out and It Follows and The Witch and The Babadook and all their amazing films, but I don't know if they've influenced everything else.
I would, for the whole decade, I would probably say the remake for It, because I couldn't go anywhere without seeing It.
Yeah.
It was just everywhere, and isn't it still the highest grossing horror movie ever made?
Why? What else would be? It made $700+ million. I don't think any horror movie has ever even come close to touching that. I thought Halloween would get close, but 2018 Halloween, but it didn't even come close. It made what, 200 something, 250. I mean, there's a lot of movies, but yeah, it's hard to say what to find. I think Jared hit it on the head. We're not far enough removed from the decade to look back and say that's the one. That's the Jason of the decade, or that's the Scream of the decade, because there's so much that we still have to digest. Like kind of what Seth was saying, he's not caught up yet.
I don't think it did. I think it's more like, which decade was it? Was it the 70s that had such a mix? You couldn't just pluck out one category and say that was the defining of the.
Yeah, but you got single movies in the 70s that you can say, like we were able to pick out two movies at the same with the 60s that definitely defined the decade with, what would we say, Exorcist and Jaws, and then Night of the Living Dead and
Alien.
Psycho.
Yeah, Psycho. Are we getting any comments?
I have to keep refreshing my phone.
I pulled up the top 50 and I want to read them off of the decade. Except for Dr. Sleep's not on there. So
let's see.
I made it before I saw Dr. Sleep.
So it said 2010s is the rise of art house horror. You got The Witch, Midsummer, Mandy, It Follows, and The Lighthouse.
What do you think dominates
the Lighthouse
top
was
10?
Great.
What do you think dominates our top 10?
It.
Yeah.
Don't know. Wait, did you say yeah?
It or
Yeah, no, well, I put it chapter 2 into one movie. So here I'll just read them off. 50s Terrifier. I was never impressed with that movie. Haunt. Did you guys get the chance to see Haunt?
I haven't seen Haunt yet.
Haunt. Yeah, it's on Shudder. It's not a bad movie.
Decent.
Halloween. Zombieland Double Tap. Oculus. Did anybody like Oculus? I loved it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Mike Flanagan.
Mike Flanagan is a horror maestro. Then The Green Room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now here's one that's underrated that everybody should try to see is Stakeland.
Yeah.
That is a great movie. It's I believe it's on Shudder. Happy Death Day.
Yeah.
Crimson Peak.
Yeah.
Housebound.
Housebound's fun.
Mandy.
Love Mandy.
At number 40. Hush.
Yes.
Love Hush.
Summer of '84.
Yes.
The 2018 Suspiria.
I liked it.
Bird Box.
And
Oh no, I didn't keep the it's together. It chapter 2 is number 35. Let Me In.
Yeah, it's a good remake.
The other one is in 2009, I think, right? Let the Right One In.
Yeah, Let the Right One In, man. That's
Yeah. I know, I forgot about that too. Number 33 is Insidious chapter 2. Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yes.
That's a fun movie. 10 Cloverfield Lane. Talk about an intense movie. My God.
I like that one.
good movie.
John Goodman just fucking acted his ass off in that movie, in my opinion. The Final Girls, not The Final Girl, The Final Girls, which is silly movie.
Malin Ackerman movie.
What's that?
Malin Ackerman movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 29 is The Void.
It's good.
I'm a huge fan.
I love The fucking Void.
Yes. Number 28 is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Has everybody seen that?
Horror movie. Yeah.
It's on Shudder. It's
second favorite vampire movie.
Yeah. It's not what I expected, actually. When I saw the title, I was like, what is this? Joe Bob showed it last year. Number 27 is Raw. The Devil's Candy.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
That's number 26. The Conjuring 2. One of my favorites from last year is Ready or Not.
Loved it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Insidious was number 23. Us is very good.
Loved Us.
I need to watch it again.
Not a bad movie. I think the people who are saying it's a bad movie might be a tad racist, honestly.
Jesus.
Number 21, Mother.
I love Mother.
20 is Evil Dead. I
Yes.
absolutely love the remake of Evil Dead.
That's great.
Number 19 is Sinister.
That was decent.
Number 18 is another favorite of mine. You're Next. See, this is why every movie is so much different.
Yeah.
In this list. That's why it's hard defining a.
The home invasion movies started to really bust out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Cabin in the Woods.
Yes.
Don't Breathe. The Autopsy of Jane Doe, I recommend. It's on Netflix. Yeah. The Taking of Deborah Logan is really good. I believe that's on Shudder. The Babadook is number 12. Number 11 is Midsummer. Yep. Number 10, The Wailing.
Love The Wailing.
Great movie.
Absolutely recommend. Number 9, The Lighthouse.
Good movie.
Talk about, it's kind of an intense movie to me as well. A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
Number 7 is It, 2017. Number 6 is The Conjuring. Number 5 is What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes.
I love that movie.
Have some spaghetti.
Number 4, has anybody watched the show?
I have not.
I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet.
I've watched the first 2 episodes of it. It's not the same, but it's still kind of funny.
I was hoping the Swear Wolves would come out.
Number 4 is Train to Busan. And if you
wait.
Number 4, yeah, that's a hell of a good movie.
Amazing zombie movie.
Number 3, what's that?
What was number 4?
Number 4 was The Train to Busan. Number 3
Korean
is
zombie movie.
Yeah, Korean.
The Witch is number 3.
The Witch is number 3.
That's surprising.
Get Out's number 2. And anybody know number 1?
It Follows.
Nope, that was number 17.
It was.
Yep.
What's
missing other than Dr. Sleep? What's that?
Hereditary.
Hereditary is number 1.
Okay.
Really?
I'm shocked at your list. Who people vote for that?
No, this is my personal list.
Your personal?
Yeah. Okay. Hereditary is fantastic.
Yeah.
The ending hit me so hard. I absolutely love the ending of that movie. It was a Rosemary's Baby ending. And I've told you about how I feel about that movie.
Yeah.
So every movie on that list is good except for Terrifier. I just put that in there for fan service. That is the top term of the 2010s fan service. So, but yeah, I mean,
for anybody watching that doesn't recognize all of our opinions.
True. Do you guys have a pick for something that could define the decade?
I give it to The Conjuring personally, but
I think I'm going to agree with that. I like The Conjuring. It's not my favorite of the decade, obviously.
Yeah, I would go with James Wan and then It, I guess.
So you're just saying James Wan in general?
Well, because Insidious as well.
Insidious.
Because he's responsible for Saw as well. That's what people don't give that guy credit, man. He's got 3 franchises.
Yeah.
Well, let's not forget about Aquaman.
Aquaman, and I mean, then
he can do anything. I think
he's an amazing filmmaker.
He had Dead Silence.
Do Fast and Furious?
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah, he did
the last one, I think. Too.
So yeah, I think Conjuring. Seth, I know you're not a big fan, but it's not too bad, right?
No, I enjoyed it. I liked it. It's just, I think when I went to finally watch it, which was recently, there was a lot of hype. So I was expecting something, I guess, a little bit.
Well, it's also one of those franchises that was literally commercialized to death with ads and
yeah.
And then like the second one started off really strong. I love the opening in the Amityville house, but then after that, it just kind of fell apart for me. It kind of felt too safe. Like I knew that everyone was going to make it out alive. There was like no stakes. You know, I like my horror to be.
A lot of people say that, like they said, nobody died. Nobody died. Well, to me, it reminded me of Poltergeist and the movies I grew up on, like Poltergeist. Yeah. Nobody died in Poltergeist. It's so. I don't know. That's what I kind of. That's what it felt because it was set in the 70s.
I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Took me back.
Yeah. Conjuring 2 is my favorite out of them.
I like the first one better than the second.
I do too. I don't think the second one's that bad. There's some great moments in that movie, but
Mhm.
it.
I like
I don't
Crooked
know.
Man, and I like Old Man Bill Withers.
I love Patrick and Vera as the Warrens.
I just love Patrick in general.
Yes.
Yeah,
He's amazing.
but
He's Mr. Horror.
He was really good in the Tall Grass on Netflix. If you guys have seen that,
Yeah, that
one.
was a cool movie. It was another Stephen King adaptation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Him and his son Joe Hill did it together.
Yeah. Hold on.
We're getting blasted about some of these.
Sean says, "Thanks for the fan service. You're welcome." Two things in film: Conjuring verse and TV, and Stranger Things. So that's another thing. This decade has really The Walking Dead. There's so many television shows that have popped up, and
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, The Walking Dead and Stranger Things are massive.
I think
I was thinking The Walking
Dead
Dead kind of states the decade more than any of those other franchises.
The Walking Dead. If we add TV shows into the mix, The Walking Dead absolutely defines the decade. Everybody, it's like Game of Thrones. Everybody watched it.
Right.
I mean, I ordered HBO for Game of Thrones, but The Walking Dead was everywhere. I mean, casual fans, non-horror fans, everybody liked The Walking Dead. Stranger Things is kind of the same way. I guess that's horror. Is it horror? We show the trailer, so yeah, it's horror, I guess.
I would consider it horror, sci-fi horror. Yeah,
It's like, I mean, it's like
American Horror Story is another one.
King and Spielberg together. What it is.
yeah.
No, the new Ghostbusters trailer looks too much like Stranger Things, so I'm joking. That was a thing when that first trailer hit.
I
yeah.
saw it everywhere.
Just because
also
it had that one kid in it.
Did everybody watch The Haunting at Hill House?
Yes, it's amazing.
Holy, talk about
It was great.
what's his name? The director of Doctor Sleep,
Mike Flanagan. Yeah.
Mike Flanagan. I'll watch anything he does. Has a little fingernail into. I'll watch. I'm looking forward to the next series.
So our new decade isn't over yet, but can we all just agree it's Doctor Sleep?
It came out last year though.
Did it? Okay, Invisible Man, I guess. I haven't even seen it.
Invisible Man is the defining horror movie.
Yeah, Invisible Man is this year so far.
There's also The Hunt, but I haven't seen that. The Invisible
The
Man was
Hunt,
really good.
yeah.
I thought.
I haven't seen it.
Antlers looks
Chris
promising.
Hall
I
says
want to
The
see
Walking Dead.
Antlers so bad.
There's a lot of good stuff. On
Antlers
the horizon,
looks pretty
too.
fucked up.
Yeah, there's that's one of the ones that looks good. There's a lot of stuff we missed, but it's when you're talking about defining a decade, there's a lot to consider. Obviously, I think Jared's right. I think we are too close to the last decade to really see what movies stand out to define the decade. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
I do think it's The Walking Dead overall. If you talk about horror as a whole, shows, movies, it's The Walking Dead without a doubt. My timeline on Facebook every Sunday night would be full of Walking Dead shit. And it's like nothing against. I like the comic. I'm a hipster. I read the comic, which I did. Been reading the comic until it ended from like 2005 on. So
I'm behind like a season and a half of the show.
I haven't watched The Walking Dead since Rick has been gone. So
I mean, even the comics are getting a little stale for me too.
yeah, the comics is over. It's over now.
It was kind of like around the same time. Like I dropped out of the show around the same time as I kind of fell out of it with the comic, which was when Negan came in. I don't know why. He's a great character, but
Generally, I'm somebody who has to finish what I start, which I will finish The Walking Dead show whenever it's done. I just lost interest in the week to week because it's just whatever. They did a big time jump after Rick left, and I was uninterested. So yeah, the Invisible Man was fantastic. If anybody, I think it's still on demand to rent. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor. Do yourself a favor and maybe cuddle up with some Peter Welmer and check out The Invisible Man. It's pretty good. Have you all seen The Invisible Man yet?
I have not.
yeah.
It's good.
I'm just gonna pre-order the Blu-ray and not rent it for $20.
That's all. Yeah, it's all for rent for $20.
I mean, I get that. I mean, if you go to the movies with like multiple people, like that's
You're
a
gonna
good
spend
deal.
that much anyways.
But I'd rather just save $20 and actually buy the movie.
somebody made the argument of it's $20, but if you have 3 people watching it, that pays for itself, and also
Yeah.
you can watch it in your underwear. But I was like, well, I already do that in the movie theater. What's the big deal?
He waits
You
till it
could
gets
be in
dark
your
and he
underwear.
slips his pants off.
I do. I mean, when the curtain goes up, pants come off. No, we don't have a curtain anymore. That was the old days, way old days when they'd have the. Did anybody remember that? Am I the only one that had a curtain in their theater?
Never had a curtain in my theater.
I never had a curtain in mine either.
Man. Okay, well,
You're not that much older than me either.
no. Well, I mean, we had a classic theater here called the Ritz. They had a curtain that would go up before in the big theater only though, because we also had these theaters that were like 30 seats or 20 seats or something like that, and it was a small ass room. So yeah, the Ritz and the Lincoln in town had this big stage, and they do plays and shit too. It's pretty cool. I miss the old theaters. Yeah, as Sean said, fuck renting for one person. I agree with that. $20. I mean, especially the digital copy will be out probably in the next month or so. Just buy it.
You basically could buy it for that price.
Yeah, that's why I'm waiting. Pre-order on Amazon and get the drop pre-order price.
It's worth it. I think it's good. I'm looking forward to seeing The Hunt. All right, so let's go back through real fast. The 20s, we said it was Nosferatu and Phantom of the Opera.
Or Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
An honorable mention. In the 1930s, we've got Dracula, Frankenstein, and King Kong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then the 40s is without a doubt The Wolfman. I think it's the only one that we came up with one movie for, also.
Yeah.
Cat People.
Cat People, but we settled on the one.
Oh my God.
Hey, what about semantics here? Okay. So the 50s, we talked about The Fly, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Creatures of the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
Okay. The 60s is Psycho and Night of the Living Dead, without a doubt. And I'll post it on the thing after we're done here. Night of the Living Dead versus Psycho. Which one do you like better? That way all of our people who weren't watching can also vote and be like, well, this isn't part of the brackets. This is not from the 80s. Let's just have fun, people. Come on. The 70s. I said Texas Chainsaw. Halloween's in the conversation, but Jaws and The Exorcist. I mean, The Exorcist has a stigma that everybody will think of as the scariest movie of all time, even though every movie that comes out now is scarier than The Exorcist, right?
Yeah.
But I think that helps it a lot. So the 70s. I mean, the 70s is such a great decade. Let's not forget about some of the other ones we mentioned.
Yeah, you can't deny it. I mean, Chainsaw changed the way, especially independent film, and like there's so many people who've been chasing that movie because I feel it captured something on film that I don't even think Toby and Kim knew what they had when they made it. It was just like this happy accident because it's so vicious and real and gritty and voyeuristic, and I don't know.
You know, one of the best parts about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not even the movie itself; it's the sequel and how different it is in tone. And it's the same director. That blows my mind that Toby Hooper went from making. Oh, by the way, it's not Toby in Italy. It's Tobe. Just so you know.
Dude.
Yeah. I was watching the trailer for The Beyond, and they say it's scarier than Tobe Hooper's classic Texas Chainsaw. I about lost my mind when I saw that.
Hey,
anyway, but
you want to hit off this Tobe?
I love that they're so different in tone, and I think Bill Moseley plays a big role in that movie as Chop Top.
Oh, of course.
We didn't even mention that movie. I love that, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. But anyway, moving into the 80s, because the 70s, again, such a great decade. From start to finish with Alien and Phantasm, such a great decade. One of my favorite decades of horror. And then the 80s is just, it's like the Critters ball in Critters 2. That's what the 80s is. All the critters are on the ball rolling down the hill. That's what the 80s is. There's so much shit, but Friday the 13th absolutely defines the 80s because even though Freddy was a big deal in the 80s, I mean, Jason took the 80s by by storm. Everybody knows Jason. Even the bullshit hockey masks that aren't anything from the movie, people will wear and pass off as Jason. And instead, people are still hungry for more Jason. I would suspect if we asked our followers, what would you rather see, a new Nightmare or a new Jason movie? They'd probably say a new Jason movie. Moving into the 90s, I think without a doubt, Scream. I love Silence of the Lambs, but I think Scream is the one. It kind of Scream is also somewhat responsible for bringing horror back a little bit too. Let's not forget about that.
Well, it's divided though, because there's fans that it's what killed horror, or it ruined horror, and because there were so many people who hated it, and I thought it was brilliant. It was one of the most fun times I ever had in a movie theater. I saw it Christmas night, like midnight, packed theater.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really find movies like that are so self-aware and then actually like engaging at the same time.
It's funny and scary, and
well, think about it. Think about all the things it pulled from old horror movies. I mean, those two, the killers in Scream, were replicating. I mean, there's even a line taken from Psycho.
And it's a great whodunit too, man.
Yeah, like, it really is. I didn't expect it to be. Well, I mean, for me, when I first saw the movie, I was like, "This is that fucking Billy, that greasy." They
make you second guess, like it's Billy. Oh, maybe it isn't. Oh,
yeah, no, he gets stabbed, and then you're like, "Who is it then?" Is it Randy? I mean, Scream is still a great movie, and it's one of my son's favorite movies. He absolutely loves Scream. The vision of the cheap ghost face costume is really cool and very iconic at this point. You know. Scream for me. I'm going to read some comments here. We've got one that says, "I think the '80s had the best horror movies." I will agree with that. I think they had some of the best. Sean Stiff says, "Can we just agree the '70s horror creations are superior?" Well, everybody tried to copy most of them, right? So
the '70s. I think the '70s is like the decade. To me, it had an advantage of so many good filmmakers. They had the chance. They were the first ones to be able to break because of what was allowed in film, what is allowed to be shown, the level of violence, sexuality, the topics. You're coming out of Vietnam, and you had these great filmmakers coming out of film school like Spielberg and Friedkin and all De Palma and all those guys who were masterclass filmmakers and film students. Like Carpenter and all that, who were students of the craft, and made some fucking phenomenal films, and again had no reins. There was nothing. Nothing was off limits in the '70s. They could cross lines that hadn't been crossed before in the '50s and '60s. So they were able to break ground that other filmmakers hadn't been able to get to yet.
And you didn't get to see that again. For the most part. This is a funny comment. Sean Stiff says, "Scream killed horror worse than Nirvana killed hair metal." I don't know. I think that's funny. I don't know if it's true because horror really started. I think
horror was dead before Scream came along.
I love the first Scream, but I hated how horribly apt by the other films.
That's what really the rip-offs and the sequels are what hurt Scream to me. They got blamed for all the bad films that came out after it.
I mean, it gave some good ones. I would say it gave some good ones too, because I mean, we mentioned like urban legend and stuff, but we got more of like the teenage flicks. Because like I love Faculty.
The Faculty was actually fun.
Yeah,
Robert Rodriguez.
That's I think
that was more of a monster movie though.
Yeah. Post Scream gave us a lot of weird things, but it also put horror back on the radar more than anything. I think it kind of fell off. Or what can you name a good horror movie that is well known from 1993, 4, or 5? I mean, In the Mouth of Madness came out in 94, Lord of Illusions came out in 95, but those aren't well known.
I mean, you had New Nightmare and
94.
But nothing that was massive.
Hold on, 93 was Army of Darkness, wasn't it? The best horror movie ever. I don't know. 92.
92 is Army of Darkness.
Yeah, so 92. Yeah, because I saw that with Batman Returns, I think, in the theater, in the drive-in. Oh, what about the Final Destination films? The first one was
I like
the
those.
second one I liked better.
They're a fun novelty movie
Yeah.
series, but I don't know.
Yeah, so moving on back in through the 2000s,
So what's another
we
one those did?
decided that the Saw
Who know,
franchise.
who know what you did last summer? That's another one, right?
I know what you did last summer.
Yeah,
Kevin
whatever.
Williamson was just everywhere. Dawson's Creek, that gets my vote.
There you go, Dawson's Creek.
It was a good horror story.
A Halloween episode.
2000s, we get Saw because the game was a mishmash, and then we got. I have to say that 2010s has got to be The Walking Dead, even though it's a series, because it was everywhere, and it still kind of is. Everybody watched The Walking Dead. It's not a movie, but Child's Play 3 was it 92? Was that 91?
90.
Child's Play
Well,
2 and 3.
well, 92. Well, Child's Play 2 was in the 90s.
I think it was 90, 91.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's about all we can say about this. Unless anybody has it. Let's do final thoughts. How about that? Seth, what do you got for final thoughts?
Nothing.
Awesome.
Nothing.
So you agree with the list?
Well, just like maybe say what are your personal favorites from each decade, Seth?
Is there any movies that weren't mentioned that you want mentioned?
Well, I don't know. This is the thing I had with this, like when we were talking about it the other night or last night. Is just there's so many good movies and there's so many different subgenres and like the best of each subgenre from each decade. So it's kind of hard for me to choose. I agree with you with a lot of these picks, but I kind of struggle with thinking of what's the defining of each decade besides like Friday 13th, which I thought definitely defines the 80s. But this is kind of a difficult topic,
It is. I would venture if you pick two movies out of all these we mentioned, your two favorites would be An American Werewolf in London and The Wolfman.
What?
The Wolfman and An American Werewolf in London, probably your two favorites of the whole bunch, right?
Yeah.
That we mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay. Keith, I'm going to ask you what your final thoughts are, and how many movies did we mention that you need to watch?
Mostly just the older, like 40s and 50s Universal stuff.
We'll check back with you in 2 days.
2 days.
You could watch all the Universal movies in a day and a half.
I don't own them.
Go to Amazon, add to cart.
No.
Stop buying shirts.
I've got enough movies in my cart.
These are the only ones that matter right now. Because we're talking about it right now.
Yeah, I'm not talking about it tomorrow or Monday, though.
I know it's newer, but what do you think of Demon House? I didn't see that one. I never heard
Demon
of it.
House.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that one.
I don't know.
Speaking of, we didn't mention a lot of stuff, but there are a lot of great independent horror movies that have come out also. Go to screamteamreleasing.com for more on that, because you got movies like The Barn and The Sleeper that came out over the last 10 years that they probably aren't the best movies of the decade, but they're fun. Well, I think Volumes of Blood too, and Volumes of Blood definitely define the decade. Well, no, I think there's a lot of independent movies that need to be recognized because there's a lot more that are coming out. You can see a lot of
don't leave Lombardo's movie out.
I'm Dreaming of a White Doomsday. He got enough press from us. Every Friday.
Close Calls.
Close Calls, yeah. So there's a whole stack I have here. But anyway, Scott Shermer's movies are pretty good also. The Bad Man.
Found. Harvest Lake.
Yeah, Harvest Lake. Yeah, there's a bunch of good ones. I'd stay away from most things that are coming from Wild Eye. But anyway, Jared, you got any last final words?
No, man, I think we had a pretty nice, exhaustive discussion and covered pretty much all the heavy hitters of the decades, in my opinion.
We do have a question.
Monster Squad fits. Yeah. Yep. We didn't talk about the Monster Squad. So
that's not a defining movie. For Brian, it is. Was Keith drinking milk out of a glass bottle?
What?
So in West Virginia, does a milkman come by every
what?
morning?
What was I holding resembling a glass bottle?
I don't know. What are you drinking?
I was drinking Mountain Dew earlier and water. Like, is it this?
No, I don't know. Chris Hall asked that question.
It's a water bottle.
Jeremy Tidwell says, great overall conversation about these movies. Enjoyed listening and chiming in. We'll definitely try to catch. We do Mondays, mostly about 7 Central. I will try to catch the show more often. It's still sitting there as well on Facebook. Does anyone see Danzig's Veronica yet? Thinking of renting it. I've never heard of it.
Danzig did a movie. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Nate, final words, final thoughts? I don't want to say final words because that means you're going to die right after this. So don't.
Yeah, don't jinx me.
Yeah. What do you want on your tombstone?
Final words.
I don't know what the final. I mean, we said everything. I don't know. I mean, it's defining. I think what defined that decade has to be something that was copied and mimicked and is most seen, is most viewed. So I think if you're going to the 2010s, if we're doing that, I guess it was probably the most viewed and the most known. And
it's the top grossing movie of the year of the decade for sure.
I don't know in 10 years if it's going to have the weight that it had when it came out, because I think, didn't we see a big drop off in the sequel?
Yes, I think it was mostly hype.
Yeah, because I mean,
speaking of it, I didn't know we were going to talk about TV shows. What about it in the 90s? Because I mean, it was at home, like. No,
I didn't like it when it came out.
Yeah, neither did I.
I liked Tim Curry. I like the cast. I like the other, but I hate the TV movies of the 90s. They're just so.
I wasn't alive when it came out, but I grew up with it.
That's why I want to
Depends
see
on how old you were when you saw it. I think
I'd like to see a theatrical release of Salem's Lot.
I was the age of the kids in the movie. I think it was 13 or 14 when it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't care for it. It was boring when I saw it, and it's still boring today. So the remake has been well regarded. I watched both of them back to back, and any complaints you have about the chapter 2, watching them back to back really is really good.
You're supposed to be releasing a like edited together with unseen footage and stuff all as one.
Like a 5-hour long movie.
Yep.
Nice.
So yeah, I think for me, defining the decade would be the movie that comes to mind first, but that's just per person. So whatever you think defines the 1970s that's up to you. But really, I think we came up with some really good examples of what defined the decade. I want to thank everybody for coming on Thursday, even though it's not a regular night. Let me rephrase that. Coming on the show Thursday.
Thanks to everybody who commented, man. We don't usually get that many comments.
Yeah, it's making me rethink Mondays, but come back on Mondays. We're going to be live at the same time, generally 7, 8 on the East Coast, 5 or is it 5 on the West Coast? We really appreciate you guys chiming in. We do have one last question from Kathy Lafayette. Nate, what are you working on? What was the last thing you worked on? The Jaws piece today, right?
I was working on the Shining painting.
The Shining, sorry.
Working on a few personal commissions for people, but
you did some Candyman.
And I was directing my new film until this whole virus hit. But
go ahead and plug that. You can see stuff on it on the Facebook page.
On a Dark and Bloody Ground.
There you go.
Yeah, the page is old, so I've kind of kept it because I wanted to keep things quiet on it because I think people overhype stuff too much before it's even made or it's in the can. Yeah. So we kind of stopped. We recast and we didn't announce cast and we didn't announce. I haven't shared any stills or anything like that. We've got about 40% of the movie shot.
Oh,
but I want to wait. I think it's better to wait till it's ready to really promote. At this point, I don't know what the future will hold with the movie, with what we're dealing with. So
hopefully it'll get released with everything that's going on. You take custom orders. Yeah, that's something. Message him offline, I guess. He's got
right now, I'm not doing anything because I'm not going to post office. I'm not going to printers. I'm not going to. So
yeah.
right now,
maybe after he
Yeah.
might take commissions after. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to tell all your friends about us here on Facebook, the Horror Syndicate. I also want to thank Nate for that logo that he made yesterday. He whipped it up really fast too. That was super fast. The logo, if you haven't seen it's on our Facebook page.
book artist.
It's fucking badass.
Well,
Yeah.
you're a fast comic book artist. I've seen some that take a while. Anyway, yeah, thanks again for watching us. We'll be back probably again on Monday. We're going to be talking about some things like the Reanimator movie from 1985 that we did not mention. It's another good 80s movie, and a few other movies from Stuart Gordon. So come back, check in with us. Don't forget to like the page for Seth, Nate, Jared, Keith, Statboy. Thanks, and we'll see you on Monday. Be safe, everyone.